Hello everyone, and how is it going? Today we're going to be looking at the CEDEC presentation on Blue Protocol's AI. So let's get started. I'm going to be looking at the summary that has been made on the Famitsu online site. So let's take a look at their summary. The CEDEC itself was like a game conference in Japan that happened September 2nd through the 4th. And then one of the presentations is about the group AI within Blue Protocol that supports the party battle system. So let's take a look at what it has to say. So what they're saying here is like one of the main things about the game is not just the appearance, but the battle is also something they wanted to focus on. And within the battle, they have the theme of party versus party. And in online games, when you think of party versus party or things like that, you often think of a player versus player or a player party versus a player party. But in Blue Protocol, it's player party versus enemy party. And this presentation goes to look at how parties are formed and how enemy parties are formed and how everything works. So to say enemies as same as players are assigned roles and actions to perform. So they take communication with each other and they work together. Saying something like that is simple, but for something like that to work in an online game, it's a difficult thing. It's even difficult for like players to do. So one of their tasks was to figure out how they could get enemies to work like a party. So they had their lead AI programmer talking about how he programmed the AI system in Blue Protocol. So these were their tasks they set out to complete for the AI within Blue Protocol. First is realizing the party versus party system. So they want to have the player party versus enemy party. They want it to feel like it's a battle between two actual thinking groups. So we have the players thinking of strategy, but the enemy is also thinking of strategy, and also something of an ad lib kind of feeling. So I guess a fresh kind of feeling where not everything is always the same. So being able to react to different situations and being able to imagine things on a large scale at low processing cost. So they want it to feel like you're actually fighting like another player party within the battle. So for strategies itself, it's not something they set in stone, but something that kind of changes depending on the situation. And also like something that players that just happen to be together can feel like they're fighting together as well. So something like a casual kind of feeling there as well. So within the battle, you have a number of players fighting together at the same time. Being able to have a number of players fighting together and enjoying the battle at the same time, they need to manage large scale of enemies at a low cost. So in able to do that, they have this AI hierarchy. The first they have the AI director that manages everything overall on the large scale. So it looks at the field like the map of the game. and looks at the different situations for everything and controls things like spawning and whatnot. Next, we have the faction coordinator that looks at, I guess, the factions, but also things like making subgroups or assigning members to groups and things. Next, you have the combat coordinator that looks at each individual battle and controls who's attacking what and what roles things have. And then also, finally, you have the character AI. So within this hierarchy, something that's that mainly controls the battle is the combat coordinator and the character. So in order to have the party versus party system work, first you need to figure out, well, I guess what parties are actually. So you have players out in the field, you have enemies out in the field. Now how do you decide what is a party? If you have like an instance dungeon, it's a lot easier because you have the players in the group and you can see them as a party. But at the field, players are spread out all over, enemies are spread out all over, and how you decide which groups are a party, or which things are grouped together. So that's a little bit more difficult to do. So for like example here, just saying they want to treat this as a different battle. Or like things like this. They don't want to have the enemies placed as parties. They're all placed like individually, and then they can act as a party depending on the situation. The first one, looking at the players. Players are grouped. So let me look at this. Yeah, so it's hierarchical clustering. So they look at player groups, and they look at things that are similar, the similarities between them, and they group them accordingly. So players that are close together are seen as a party. And also, there's a party grouping system within the game as well. So players that are grouped as a party within the game have a bias where they're can be a little bit farther apart and be still treated as a party within the AI of the game. This is the image that's showing that. So you have, without a party, these two players be treated as separate. Let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger. Okay, there we go. Text is bigger now. So without the bias, they're treated as separate parties, but with the bias of the party system within the game, players that are even separated a little bit are still treated as a group to the AI. So moving on, we can see the various party groups that the AI determined within the map. And this is all happening automatically, dynamically as the game moves on. So parties can change or grow or decrease depending on the situation. So next up is the enemy party formation. So each enemies have a I guess, like, was it aggro range or something like that, an area that they like see enemy players or whatnot and decide to attack. So yeah, if a player enters that range, they get aggroed and they attack the player. If there's multiple players within that area, the enemies are given a target list that have all the players within it, and they choose the best target based on various factors. so this is how various parties end up fighting each other. So you have the player parties forming by their distance and whatnot, distance to each other, and enemies also in a similar way form up like that as well, and then they end up fighting each other. They're saying that enemy has a list of targets and they choose a target based on that. So when looking at this above image here, there's a little bit difficult to see, but there's this blue sphere here. And that's the enemy party. And within the screen, there's 4 different enemies. And they're all within the same sphere. A little bit difficult to see, but I believe you say that 3 of them are fighting with another player farther off in the screen. And if the player in the front of the screen moves a little bit farther away, the cluster breaks up into 2. So now you have 2 different enemy groups formed. So that's how enemy groups can break up or form together automatically, depending on the situation. So now let's look at the enemy's AI. This is the agent architecture for the character AI. You have the perception, which takes in surroundings and collects the information. You have the brain that processes the information that's collected and decides what to do. And then you have action itself that moves forward with the action that was decided by the brain. So things like which direction to move, and animations and things like that. And within the brain here, we also have a utility system about what to do, HTN planning, how to do it, and then behavior tree that has a more concrete way of doing it. So first looking at the utility system here. First decide what should be done based on the situation. To fight, to patrol, to run away. And you have HTN planning. So based on the goal, it formulates a plan based on what to do. And even with the same goal, the approach characters takes could be the approach taken could be different depending on the character. I said the important thing here is deciding what to do is HTN planning decides what to do. And they said, I think it's Hierarchical Task Network is the name of it. As a easier way of explaining it, say you are waking up in the morning. So you're waking up here. And you can do these 2 tasks in any order. You have changing clothes and eating breakfast. That's morning preparation. And then below there, you need to get ready. And to get ready, getting ready and then eating. This is for breakfast, so breaking down the breakfast. And so for getting ready, you could maybe like boil some rice, or you could toast some bread. So you get ready and then you eat. And then once it's all done, you go outside the house. And there's a couple different options for some of these things. So like eating the rice or eating bread. Yeah, so it kind of breaks down the tasks for things. You have like the breakfast, you have it broken down into getting ready and eating, and then getting ready is broken down to preparing things based on the types of preparing the rice, preparing the bread. And within this planning system, they also added a preferential system to it that limits what is chosen. So, for example, in the morning when you're getting ready, the preference is to use something that you have more of. So we have more rice than bread, so we decide to use rice in the morning to eat. But if we had more bread, then we would use the bread. So those are ways preferences could be added to decide which... but there's multiple choices to be made and to decide which choice to take. And on the opposite side of things, at the task completion, we can look at goal preference. So for example, for breakfast, having less dishes to wash at the end would be the preference. So if we had rice, might need a rice bowl, chopsticks, a pot to boil it, and then a spoon to get the rice out. But with the bread, we might just need a plate. So we decided to go with the bread because there's less dishes to wash at the end. And then there's another thing that decides which order to do tasks. Something called a trajectory preference. For example, we have two different choices here. We can change clothes or eat. And originally the order didn't matter, but choosing which order we want to do that could be based on preference. So we could put a preference to change clothes first and then eat the breakfast. It would give more points, but eating breakfast and changing clothes would give less points to that decision path. So now let's actually look at how this is used within Blue Protocol. So in Blue Protocol, the HTN planning and preferences are applied to the tactical skills within Blue Protocol. And these are the action sets used for... We also have the players with tactical skills, but enemies also have tactical skills as well. For example, you could have close range attacks or long range attacks, buffs or heals. There's different tactical skills that enemies can have. And choosing which skill to use is based on preferences and the situation. This image here shows enemy with a shield guard tactical skill, and also one without it. The enemy with the shield guard tactical skill decides to use this action because it's the best based on its situation, but this one does not have that skill, so we see that it's not guarding at all. So by adding tactical skills like that, you can shape how an enemy acts. Now let's look at enemy strategy in battle. Yeah, so the enemy party strategy. So first, enemies are assigned roles. So why are roles important? So by assigning roles, enemies can act in different ways. So you have attacker, a healer, a defender. So you have, like in this image, you have the attacker attacking the player, the healer healing its allies, and then the defender defending the healer. However, just assigning roles like this does not work for all situations. For example, what happens if you had multiple healers in the same situation? Or multiple defenders? It would turn into an unusual battle, have healers always healing each other, or only having enemies defending the healer and not attacking. It might be interesting itself, but it could cause problems. So to solve problems like that, the combat coordinator comes into place. So it gets the information from the various enemies, and it comes up with a strategy and assigns them orders to perform. So here's the information coming into the combat coordinator from the enemies, and coming out of the combat coordinator is the orders and other information. No orders are given between the characters themselves. Everything passes through the combat coordinator here. So I guess if you were to give another example of what it's happening here, it's like having multiple enemies fighting and then having like a operator or somebody watching from above assigning what they do. And a hierarchy of the structure of the combat coordinator is the same as the characters themselves. So with the combat coordinator here, we have the same thing where perception, it takes in information needed from the battle. And yeah, gets everything from the members within the battle and whatnot. And then it decides how it wants each of its members to act. And then tells the members which actions to perform. And the same thing again, once again, the brain, what should be done, how HTM planning, how it should be done, and behavior tree performing a more specific plan to do it. And there's different scores assigned to different strategies. So you could have like strategy A, B, C, and the strategy B here has the highest score, so that's the one they decided to go with, because it's the best based on the situation. You could have something, I don't know, maybe like attacking from afar or surrounding an enemy. So you could look at the distance from the players. The players are farther away, so you decide to just attack them from afar. The players get closer in, you decide to surround them. Yeah, so holding ground or surrounding. You can have things change based on that. So looking at this image here, we have scores. Currently, the player is farther away, so the holding score is higher, and the surrounding score is lower, so they're not going to surround the player. But as you get closer, the surrounding score goes up, so the enemies decide to surround the player. That's the strategy that the combat coordinator decides to take. Okay, and then for the next thing, I guess it's talking about kind of dividing up the roles to make the combat more interesting. Players also do it where they can maybe change their skills or equipment to perform a different role as needed. So enemies might need to do the same thing. They could perform multiple roles, but they might need to be separated up based on the situation. So it looks at the enemies and decides which role each of them should do based on the situation. So I think like one thing here is it's saying the attack values of things. So the person with the shield has an attack value of 0.8, and this guy with the club here only has 0.5. So this guy's better at attacking, but he also has a defense value of 1.0. And this person doesn't have any defense, so while this could be an attacker, it's assigned as a defender since it has a defense value. So the interesting thing about the combat coordinator, it just takes in the information from its members, so it doesn't try to come up with strategies that its members can't do. So it just takes in the information from its members and decides what strategies its members are capable of doing, and then gives them those strategies to perform. So now looking at how ways enemies can work together in combination, perform skills. So how do we get, so it's talking about how enemies can cooperate together and like communicate together as well. Yeah, so something they need to communicate together to be able to perform these certain things. So it's saying that they use something like a tuple space to collect information from various things. For example, enemies with low HP might ask for healing or support. And a healer that's already been registered within the tuple space, once it receives a request for healing, it acts accordingly to that. So you have a healer request here, healer request here. Yeah, so the healer, and then these are acting based on that. The healer is registered in that to act to the healing requests. And then each of the healers that receive requests based on that can give their distance to the target and a value based on the distance to the tuple space. And based on the information gathered, the combat coordinator comes up with a plan, choosing which healer is the best to perform the healing action. So the communication flow we have here. So people that characters and whatnot that want to be notified, register to the tuple space and send a message to the, and then messages are sent to tuple space. People that need notifications are sent those. What's the result of what's been processed sent back to the tuple space, and all the information that's been gathered, the coordinator uses for planning. So you have an example here of area buff. So this is one strategy that enemies could use. So it's something that buffs up allies' attack power within the area. So first of all, the healer that can use this buff gives the combat coordinator information that they can use it. And then, so the healer using the buff and the attackers that will receive the buff register to the tuple space so they can receive notifications. Yeah, so this is showing that it's the healer is telling the combat coordinator, I have this wide range buff that I can use. Notify me when it's gonna happen. Same thing with the other attackers. So yeah, what's happening here is it's looking at the combat coordinator, looks at the situation and sees that now would be a good time to use that buff. So it tells the healer, get ready to use that buff. And then the healer says, all right, I'm starting to use the buff. The combat coordinator then tells the attackers that it's going to receive the buff to get ready and be in the area. And then they send it back. Okay, I'm in the area and I'm going to receive it. And then the combat coordinator plans, gives out the actions based on the information gathered. So they're saying that this is the end of the CEDEC session, and the party versus party system wasn't fully realized within the closed beta. So it's something to look forward to going forward. But yes, that's the look at the AI system within Blue Protocol. So yeah, the party versus party system, player party versus enemy parties, and it's something that to look forward to while playing the game. Anyways, thanks for watching the video, and I hope to see you again.